Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
All right, it is Wednesday, and all of our guests today, including Farhan Lalji, standing by. Brought to you by our title sponsor, Able Auctions, ableauctions.ca. Delaney's OK Tire and Langley inbox just before we get to Farhan. Creed from East Van. Money talks, Rick. Money talks. Have you seen the price of groceries? Donnie is right. Again, that's Creed from East Van. Send him a hat. And you know what? The majority of people in the Delaney's OK Tire and Langley inbox are not agreeing with me. I just picked the one or two guys, one guy that agreed with me. Farhan Lalji joins us now from TSN. How are you, sir?
Good. What am I agreeing or not agreeing with?
Well, we talked about Rick Tocchet, who's, I would say, likely to win the Adams Award. We're going to find out he's going to win the Adams Award later today. He's going to make $2.75 million next season. His contract is up at the end of next season. And all I said was something to the effect of, and Rick is going on about how, well, he's going to get an extension. I said, what if he gets an offer somewhere else for a lot more money? And Ryan and Rick are going, oh, he would never leave for more money. And I'm like, a lot of people would at the very least consider it. What do you think?
I think he'd leave for more money, but right now I think he feels like he's in a really good situation. He's got people that he likes working with in terms of Alvin and Rutherford, and there's a level of trust and alignment there. I think all of that matters. But look, if all of a sudden someone put $10 million on the table or $7 million on the table, and there was a big gap there, boy, my dog sounds like she needs more money. This is usually she sits right here and she's quiet. Now she's barking. She needs more money or at least some dog food. But I think that if there was a big gap, right? I mean, would he leave if the Canucks offered him $4 million and someone else offered him $5 million? I don't know that he leaves for that. But if the gap is bigger, I think he would leave.
Yeah. Okay. What's your dog's name, by the way?
Luna. She's a killer. She's a killer attack dog, or so she thinks. Even though she's quite soft and gentle and generally, she hears people outside. I think there's a delivery man leaving something at the door, so she's getting excited.
We'll get an update on that later, Farhan. Yeah. How would you describe the Canucks season, which of course ended recently?
I think it's you can only be happy with what they did this season, and where they got. I mean, when you look at the quantum leap forward this team took, they were a bubble team at best. And in order for you at the beginning of the season to not view them as a bubble team, you were a true fan and not anyone that looked at their roster and their situation with any level of objectivity, right? So you would have had to have been a fan in every sense of the word. So a blind fan. And so the fact that they got through that, win 50 games, won the Pacific Division, and got to Game 7 of the second round of the playoffs, I think is great. But if you have a level of disappointment that they weren't able to find a way through that round, I think that's fair too. But overall, now that the season is over, I think everybody should take a 10,000-foot view of it all and be pretty pleased with where they're at right now.
This team could look very different next year, Farhan. There's so many UFAs and RFAs. We talked a little bit about on the show yesterday who they're going to try and keep and who they are not going to try to keep, how much money they got. What do they got? 25, 26 million in cap space, but a ton of guys to sign. Who's on your list of getting done in terms of signings?
It depends. The answer to that question is whoever you don't leverage to get paid too much, Rick. Right. Because we know the power you have in this market.
Oh, stop it.
That's very true.
So that's first and foremost. For me, I think they've got to reach out to Elias Lindholm and try to see if there's a window there. I think when they signed him, I think many people kind of expected him to be a rental. And, I know the team said all the right things, but you weren't going to pay this guy $8.5 million. And then as the season progressed, you thought, okay, well, maybe that price is coming down because he hasn't been playing great. But I think he certainly reestablished his value in the playoffs, right? Because he was easily one of the Canucks' top 3 players in the playoffs. So it would be, we'll see what they can get him for. Might he take a little less to stay? A little less, but, ultimately I think this guy's going to be paid quite well. And then, you know how I feel about Phil Roenick. I don't think that I would pay what that number probably looks like. I mean, if it starts with a 7, I wouldn't touch it. I would, if they could get him for less, maybe, but it doesn't sound like they could. Everybody else, though, I'm on the Nikita Zadorov bandwagon. I'm on the Dakota Joshua bandwagon. I think they need to get those guys done. Tyler Myers, I think we all know that he's got a real strong desire to stay here, and I think they should find a way to take advantage of that because he's playing as well as he ever has at any point in his career this season, if you ask me. So I think those are the main ones. I think Archer Shilovs, you got to find a way to keep. I don't think that costs you too much, which probably comes at the expense of Casey DeSmith. So those are the main ones that jump to mind.
All right, let's talk football. The BC Lions, if you can believe this, got a preseason game in Calgary this weekend. What are you hearing out of Lions training camp in Kamloops?
Yeah, I think there's some optimism. I think there's a lot of excitement about what they're showing in their receiving core. Talking to Neil McAvoy and Ryan Rigmaiden, I think they're really excited with some of the guys they've got in that building that they could potentially fill in for, a guy like Dom Rhymes who left and Lucky Whitehead who's gone as well. And, both those players missed extensive time last year with injuries anyway. And then Keon Hatcher is not going to be back till halfway through the season, but they like what they've got in the building to potentially get them through until Keon gets back. I think they're excited about what they're seeing in the secondary, as they've got to find some young pieces there too and turn that around. And, it's interesting. The Christian Covington signing has really changed things at the 11th hour because you can now recommit a Canadian starter full-time along the defensive line. And for BC, that's going to be an interior spot with Covington and other guys rotating through. And that might give you the flexibility to start a third American on the offensive line, which is what they've been practicing with quite a bit so far in Kamloops. So, I think those are some interesting pieces. And from everything I've heard, Vernon Adams is having a great camp. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in the weekend. I mean, I don't think they're going to take a lot of veterans. It's going to be a really young group that goes to Calgary to play this weekend, which most teams do. It's young on the road, veteran at home for everybody. But I want to see what some of these young receivers can do and what some of these young defensive backs can do.
It's supposed to be my turn to ask you a question, but I know Rick has a question that he really wants to ask you. Go.
Who's
going to win the Grey Cup?
There you go.
Win the Grey Cup?
There you go.
No, but
can BC win? Okay.
No, but you don't have to say it. I know you're going to pick Winnipeg anyways. So you live in Vancouver, but you're going to pick Winnipeg for the fourth year in a row, and we know why. Yeah. We know why. You love Winnipeg.
No, not at all.
They're pretty good. Hey, back to hockey for a second. After they were eliminated, after the Canucks were eliminated by the Oilers, Rick Tocchet had this to say. I'm paraphrasing here. He felt that the Canucks increased their level of respect in the market. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think they did. And I think they've increased their level of respect around the league, right? Just in terms of their process and how they're getting it done and what their trajectory now looks like. Because we saw this team under Jim Benning just continuously spin its wheels. And look, some of the key players here were a result of Jim Benning, but in terms of an overall plan, a coherent way to build this thing piece by piece, there never was one. And now with Jim Rutherford, there is one. And Patrick Allvin, of course, as well. So I think if you're a Canuck fan, you can get excited about it. I think the fans themselves were incredible this season, and just the way they handle themselves in the playoffs. So look, there's always that toxic undercurrent, right, on Canucks Twitter. A small part of Canuck Twitter, which makes the fan base look bad, but the majority of everybody in the building and the people on Scott Road Sellies and everybody else that's at the viewing parties and things like that. I mean, it's awesome. And the fact I got asked the other day on an out of market show about what I thought of everybody celebrating them at the end of the game after they lost. Well, of course you are, but now you're going to go from a level of freshness to a level of expectation in years forward, right? So people are going to be a little more demanding, whereas right now this was just fun, and it was so cool after 9 years to get back into the playoffs and to have those parties and to have those events and to have the city just captivated for a month of playoff action. That was cool, but now people are going to demand it. So we'll see what that looks like going forward.
All right, so you'll join us next week unless you get a better offer, right?
Oh, if Rick is my agent, there's a chance. Because we know.
I only talk to agents. I don't want to become one. Believe me.
Okay. Well, I'll get one just so he can talk to you.
There you go. Okay. Farhan.
That's a pretty good way to do business.
Thanks for this, Farhan. Appreciate it. We will talk to you next week.
See you guys.
You bet.